Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ellie Breakwell, the APM Branches Coordinator, and thank you for joining us today at this Northwest Branch webinar. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded and you are in listen-only mode. There'll be some interactive elements to today's webinar, so please have your phone or another web browser open and ready to go to menti.com and use the code 15052073. This will also be displayed on the screen with each question. Today we are joined by Andrew Tyson and Gavin Simmons. Andrew is Head of Profession for the Project Management at Sellafield Ltd. He has 30 years of experience at Sellafield, delivering projects in a high complex hazard environment. Sellafield has also been a journey to improve project management over the last 10 years, with a recent focus on front-end phase initiatives and to assist project certainty during PDRI. And Gavin Simmons is Program Director at KBR. Gavin is a project management professional with over 25 years experience in engineering and project management and safe development of major projects with TIC up to $12 billion in a variety of industry sectors including oil and gas, petrochemical, energy, nuclear and infrastructure. Gavin has led the implementation of PDRI at Sellafield throughout the project and program partners 3PM team. Thank you again for joining us. And without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to you, Andrew and Gavin.
Yep. Welcome, everybody. I'm Andrew Tyson, Head of Profession of Project Management at Sellafield. And why did we trial PDRI? For a number of reasons. One, majorly, that our stakeholders, the NDA, asked us to try it because it worked well in the oil and gas industry. We did trial it 20 years ago at Sellafield, and we built a lot of the principles into our processes. So some people thought, well, why are we going to use a tool to test them when we've built them into our processes? And we've got to remember PDRI is only a tool that will give us some data to help improve delivery. So what we did is we went to our program and project partners and we basically had a partnership for 20 years. And the aim of that was to bring best practice from the industry into Sellafield. And we went to them and they'd actually done this in other industries, especially oil and gas. So what we did is we set up a steering group. And I think one of the big successes is why we set that steering group up and how we performed as we trialled PDRI. So we set it up as really like a learning group with no fixed agenda, but to trial it on a number of major projects and see if the benefits could be realised. And I'll talk you through some of the key principles that we defined throughout that course. So we invited the stakeholders there to the steering group, and we had the facilitators who did PDRI. We had professions there to support because they run the processes, and we also brought the projects in as we were going to do PDRI on their projects and involve them throughout, and then the exit when the next project comes on and the next project manager arrives. And there's been a lot of benefit of that because at first we trialled PDRI in places that projects had gone into construction and we trialled it and they were mature in the design process. So we went back to some fairly fundamentals and what we realised is everybody had a different opinion to what PDRI was. So one of our key starting points was to define what it was and what it wasn't, so people didn't mix up while we were trialling it. And we shared that with all our stakeholders, and we kept that at the heart of what the steering group was about. Further to that, the next key step on the journey, we decided to do it straight out of the box, so not change it or try and Sellafield or nuclearise it. And that had some key benefits, but it also had some key issues. One of the key issues was that the facilitators had to spend longer explaining some of the language because it's slightly different to the language we use in design. But the benefit of it is that we can benchmark it back with the Construction Institute. So, and also we've got all the tools given to us from CII, so we didn't have to go and reinvent the wheel. So it saved a lot of time and effort, but it does take a bit more facilitation to do it that way. And lo and behold, just when we're about to launch this, we got hit by COVID, as the whole world got hit by COVID. And basically, we were going to do it by group and interaction of group originally, but we had to go on to teams, and we did individual participation and then group feedback. And we found that probably more powerful because everybody gets a say on that journey, and everybody can then test their alignment with others in the group session. So we probably found that as a benefit from COVID. It sort of forced us to do something different than we planned, but it was actually probably as efficient, and we can do it from anywhere now. We don't need to sit in the same offices as the people. So that whole use of teams and that way of working has really helped, in my opinion. We didn't really trial it a different way. And the other point that we did go back to is to the CII Institute, was we did it where they recommended doing it in the design life cycle, and we found a lot more benefit in that than doing it just where somebody thought we should do it. So we've gone back to putting it into the process where defined by the Institute themselves, and all their research says we should do it. So I think they were sort of the key principles, but the other sort of key principle we did was, at Sellafield we get accused of over-assuring projects. There's too much assurance. So we had a big debate on what is this? Is it self-assurance? Is it capability assurance to the projects? And in the end, we settled on it was for the project manager. So we're only doing this to help the project manager define improvements for him to or her to improve her projects. So although we've had the same facilitation team on each one, the project team have took the ownership of the output, and I think that's also been a very powerful lesson in this journey. It's their work, and they own the output, and they own the actions. So on that, I'll hand over to Gavin, who'll talk you through the process.
Thank you, Andrew. So good evening, everybody, or good morning if you're in a different part of the world. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is broadly a little bit about the tool, more lessons from our deployment here at Sellafield, building on what Andrew's just outlined, and then finish off with a few of our kind of views from the portfolio of reviews that we've done so far. What are some of the weaker areas, and what do we have to look for from the tool to guide our projects to improve? So the Project Definition Rating Index tool, PDRI for short, developed under the guidance of the Construction Industry Institute, and it was really developed in a almost academic environment with a great deal of research going in, tested against billions and billions, greater than 96 billion, and I'm sure that number is higher now, worth of projects at all different sizes. So it's heavily scientifically based and gives a strong basis to build on in terms of your project maturity. Some of the benefits that it provided were cost savings in the ranges that you can see there on the screen, schedule reductions, giving much greater alignment, transparency, and once you've done more and more within your own organization, you can start to build up this portfolio level view, and also they kind of understand how any particular project is performing relative to the other projects within your portfolio. Another real big benefit of it is it's partnered with best practice in the form of the CII front-end definition toolkit. And so that really, not only does the tool diagnostically identify areas that might need improvement, but it also is partnered with some guidance on how you might improve and bring that maturity and project environment score up at the next review. As Andrew suggested, the principal beneficiary is really the project team, especially from the way that we deployed it. And they get intelligence on where their project is at, the areas they need to improve, and maybe make sure that they are prepared for the more formal levels of assurance. But there are other beneficiaries as well. The project sponsor or other kind of senior stakeholders, well, they'll get either a confirmatory assessment of maybe some of the kind of what they intuitively believe their project to be at. And then also any assurance teams, they get intelligence on maybe some weaker areas they might want to probe in the more formal assurances. So there's a number of beneficiaries from this tool. So there's the PDRI tool is really a suite of tools now, and they cover various projects, various types of projects. Their primary ones that we've been using at Sellafield are the buildings tool and the industrial projects tool. The buildings tool is kind of predicated on an architect-led design, whereas the industrial tool is predicated on a process-led design. There are some other tools for other niche areas of industry. We haven't found that they've matched the type of projects that we do in Sellafield. And within these tools, they've generally asked 60 to 70 different questions about various elements of project maturity. Now, not every question is relevant to every project, and so the tool itself has a normalization process where you can omit certain questions and still get a benchmarkable score at the end of it. And those maturity questions really test kind of three main areas. You know, the basis of the project decision. So do we understand the requirements, the business case, and some of the kind of value-based elements. Moving beyond that into the basis of design, so typically is the more technical questions. And finally, there's a section on the execution approach. So is the project being set up with the right processes to support a successful execution? Now, over the years, projects were going through PDRIs, getting good maturity scores, but were actually found to not always turn out to be the successes that the scores and the progression of maturity indicated they would be. So the CII went back and looked at those projects and identified that the project environment perhaps wasn't as optimal as it could be to support the team in generating a kind of a high confidence feed package. So they've added an extra tool into the suite, which is looking at the project environment. And this is really a set of accuracy questions. So it's asking, does the team have all the right elements in their project environment to enable them to provide an accurate package at the point of the final investment decision. And really that score will then give you an indication of how much confidence can I have in the project, in the maturity score based on that project environment. Now, the PDRI has generally been a self-assessment basis and is definitely best with facilitation. And as Andrew outlined earlier, we've developed a bit of an approach away from the traditional group, which we found to be very beneficial. So our facilitation that we use here at Sellafield is based on the same group of facilitators undertaking each review. That brings consistency in both the style of questioning and with the rigor with which the questions are asked, answered, and assessed. So why is this all really important? Well, as you can see here from this diagram, the biggest opportunity to add value into a project is in the early phases. Now, some of those terminologies along the bottom there are OBC, SOC, this is within the government sector here. But it's really the different stages between feasibility, getting to your single concept, and ultimately at FBC, final business case, final investment decision, having that finalised feed package with a high confidence cost and schedule estimate associated with it. So the value in understanding is a project on the right maturity glide path is to test it at various times throughout that phase of project definition, because even if you bring your absolute best team in the execution phase, your opportunities to really make significant gains just aren't there anymore. And that's why it's really important that we measure it. And here in Sellafield, particularly, we have projects with very, very long lifetimes in the nuclear industry, some of them kind of 10 to 15 years from inception to completion. And so making sure that that definition and good project definition is added at that initial opportunity is very important. So a bit of a busy slide, and I apologize for that, but there's a lot to try and get through. So the collaboration with the stakeholders, Andrew mentioned this multi-party collaborative working group, and it had representation from our clients, the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, our other client, Sellafield, and ourselves at PPP. And not only was this a very collaborative working group, but they were really, we worked completely openly with them. So we briefed them on everything we were doing in the trials and the early deployments, and ultimately we still have this working group to this day. And it really helped shape and bring everyone along on the journey together. It also meant that we had a high stakeholder confidence in the kind of the output that we generated. So maybe at the beginning there's a bit of skepticism: does project self-assessment really deliver the fair and honest picture? And certainly the stakeholders have been able to take confidence that our process is rigorous and is independent. And allowing us a pilot phase and not kind of a trial, not going straight into deployment, really enabled us to optimize our approach, learn as we went what was working in this particular environment. It's to an extent a bit of an institutionalized environment, and so it really it gave us the opportunity to make sure that the process was working as intended, but it was also giving the benefits to ultimately the customers that they were looking for. And our working group even enabled the project managers, the project directors of the recipient or the beneficiary projects to come back and provide their input as well into the process. Now, in terms of positioning PDRI, so Andrew mentioned what it's not. It's not a peer review. It's this kind of project self-assessment, and we were careful to brief everyone on what we were doing, why we were doing it, but also make sure that there really wasn't a blame culture. This wasn't some kind of thing that would be used as a stick to beat projects up with if they scored badly, and nor was it something that they felt they had to pass. It was moved away from, or in advance of the sanction gates. It wasn't a condition on going to sanction to get any particular score. It was just an informing tool. And removing that need to pass mentality was really important in this industry. And as Andrew said, we did it kind of by or with the project and for the project. We were wholly independent facilitators with aside from our employing companies, with no skin in the game to present any kind of vision or output in any particular way. And really that act of doing it to the project, with the project, meant that the project team, it was their views, it's their ownership. It wasn't a peer review. In our process, we interview people, we talk to them, we get their scores, we get their commentary, their justification behind their scores. But what it really enables us to do is to then present back to the project management, to the participant team, what did we hear, what were they telling us, and what are their suggestions on areas they might improve. And often the project managers also saying to us, well, what do you think? And we will tell them, but arguably the real value is in them hearing from their team what their challenges are, what help they need, and how they might go about improving that. So that's been a real benefit from our method of deployment. Now, Andrew also mentioned this kind of use of PDRI out of the box and some of the challenges that we had with individuals understanding some of the terminology. Now, some of the terminology is from more prevalently used in other industries, in the process industry in particular, and has needed a little bit of adaptation to the particular circumstances of that project, sometimes of that individual. At the beginning of each interview, we kind of take a little quick bio of all our participants to understand, are they familiar with oil and gas terminology? Are they familiar with international terminology, which maybe isn't used locally in this area? And with that information, we can then shape the questions and make them relevant whilst maintaining their intent. And that means that all our output is justifiably benchmarkable and can be used in that way. In terms of the kind of people that we speak to, we're not just speaking to the project manager and a few of their key lieutenants. We really try and get a diverse group of participants from across the project team into the client side. So people from operations, people from the program and the enterprise level. And we'll also sometimes, where appropriate, have people from the supply chain. So not only have we got a wide selection from the core project team across all the various levels there, but by bringing in that wider group, that gives us a great amount of diversity, avoids groupthink, and so on. Now, the interview approach, as I said, is we kind of act independently, but we also treat everything that we hear completely confidentially. And that gives the participants anonymity, enables them to really open up and kind of tell us what they think. Sometimes, you might feel that people come in with a particular disposition towards, being quite positive or feel that they might need to take the company line. But when you're asking someone kind of 20, 30 questions in the course of an hour and a half, it's very hard for them to answer that way and keep up any pretense. So it really means that our output is very genuine and very honestly given to us. Now, to be fair, the project managers that we speak to encourage their teams to give us the whole truth and not to feel the need to sugarcoat things. But nonetheless, the process that we're doing also drives that kind of behaviour. It also means that each participant has an equal voice. So some people might be too shy. There might be dominant personalities as well in the room who just take over the entire conversation. So our process really gives everyone an equal voice. Now, one of the other problems we get with projects is that they kind of say, oh, no, not another process. Andrew referenced earlier, there's a lot of assurance processes already here in this industry. So our process is very agile. As we said, we can interview someone from anywhere across a platform like Microsoft Teams. It's low burden. Each individual just has to give up an hour and a half, not a number of days to maybe battle through the full question set. It also means we can target the questions to that individual's area of expertise and not have them waste their time on things that within the project sphere they know nothing about. So the total contact time between a little bit of preparation and the interview is about a couple of hours for each participant. And if they choose to take part in the dissemination workshop that we might have, it's somewhere between 3-4 hours, maybe up to half a day. So it's very low individual burden. And what it's meant is that projects are maybe going through other really important phases of preparation for formal gates. They're not really getting disrupted by taking part in this process. So some of the conclusions that we drew from the deployment is that, as Andrew said, using these kind of preset sequence or sequential application points is starting to really show us the improvement in maturity as projects progress along that kind of glide path to success. The portfolio results that we've got are really powerful and really enable projects to understand, they might feel like they're in a bad shape. Actually, the results maybe show otherwise, or vice versa. And then really that's also helping the senior leaders, the senior stakeholders to understand where their projects are and how they fit in the wider portfolio. And it also kind of presents a real opportunity to use this intelligence to target other interventions. So PDRI is asking, 70, if you include the accuracy, another 27, so nearly 100 questions across the review, and it's really only asking 1 or 2 questions in any particular area. But if they're giving a feedback that there's a real concern in that area, it means that you don't need to go in and review the whole project in depth. You can target where you might undertake a kind of more detailed intervention or analysis. So some real benefits from that deployment. So talked earlier about the portfolio and why that's important. With the maturity, and apologies that the target there in the yellow hasn't shown up as good in this presentation, but you can see the ranges and whether you're at PDRI stage 1, stage 2, stage 2I, or stage 3, you have a kind of a target envelope that you want to be in, and a lower score is better. And so what we found in Sellafield was that really all the projects have been within the target envelope, and in a couple of cases a little bit over mature, and that was just down to the various project stages when we were undertaking the trial. So at face value, everything looks great. Everyone's in the right shape at that point. However, when we looked at the accuracy question set, and especially in a portfolio, what we found was that in most cases, about 60% of the projects that we surveyed, they really weren't in the position of having an optimal project environment. So maybe called into question how much confidence we could really have in some of those maturity ratings. So you can see there are some projects as low as kind of 52% against a target of 76. And interestingly, although in the maturity section you have the ability to kind of incrementally bring your maturity up towards the target, in the accuracy, what the CII have put in place is that you really need to have that optimal project environment in place early. You have to make that investment in getting all the right conditions for your team to be successful. It seems kind of obvious, but it's not necessarily always the highest thing on anyone's radar once they get stuck into trying to deliver their project. So by approximately the point where you have your kind of single concept, you would be looking to have already in place that optimal project environment and not be trying to play catch up thereafter. Now, what we found amongst our projects was that there were a number of them with a number of issues that meant that they weren't in the shape they needed to be. So very important, and again you can see in the bottom left-hand corner that if you're getting to that kind of point at OBC or at single concept, you are not, and you haven't got that project environment in place, to an extent you've missed the greatest opportunity potentially for baking in the most amount of value. So it's really important that that investment is made, and we'll touch on that later. So a few other points to note. These are broken down into a few different areas. So first of all, looking beyond the headline score. So I've just been talking to you about headline scores. It's useful. It gives you that kind of immediate graphical value add and information. But the real value is in the individual elements and understanding how those at element, at category level, what are the weaker areas. And that's particularly the value of, or the benefit of our approach. We're interviewing multiple people, we're getting multiple scores for each of the elements. We can identify at a much more micro level what the areas that need addressed are. And then also, some of the categories have heavier weightings than others, and in an environment, a regulated environment like here at Sellafield, sometimes the business case is strongly developed very early, and that means that it might contribute towards a higher than representative score in the PDRI output. So, very much recommend people to really get down into the elements to see the particular areas of weaknesses and of strengths, of course. Now, some of the Sellafield processes, not necessarily as aligned with best practice as they necessarily could be, and that's maybe just, again, something that's developed over time. So some activities are developed much later in the process than the CII kind of best practice would indicate. They still get done by that kind of final investment decision, but they may be less developed early on and contribute to a lack of maturity at that point. The schedule development, also something that's really under pressure all the time. People tend to focus on the here and now. So if they're in engineering, or in this front end phase, their schedules are heavily loaded to just those activities in front of us towards the next gate. Reporting pressures, resource pressures mean that kind of developing the appropriately detailed forward plan is kind of not given the priority it might need to be. But when you think about the ultimate goal of the front-end planning process is to get to that final investment decision with a high confidence schedule, cost estimate, and other things, it's something that does need a bit more attention. Now, particularly in our method of collecting data, we get hard data that represents difference of opinion, and that Initially in the trial, we almost tried to bring it to consensus in the course of undertaking kind of Delphi-style rounds of trying to draw people and give people different opinions from others and see if they wanted to change theirs. But later on, we recognized that the real value was actually in that difference of opinion. It's highlighting that somebody or more than a number of participants think things are great, and others, for whatever reason, think things are wildly in a bad place. And so we tend to get, in most areas, quite a spread of opinion. And we can really use that both in our analysis and in our subsequent kind of dissemination workshop to kind of test, the team. Some people think this is great, some people think this is not so great. What does the team think now, listening to those different opinions? And so we can draw out some of the benefits in that discussion. There's also some very specific things. There's quite a lot of focus on using kind of go-bys or in the terminology here, kind of a copy-repeat project and the kind of learning legacies from those, the LFE. And what we found was that some people were heavily or highly based their score on the perception that, well, we were just repeating, when in actual fact things have moved on and the projects are not as much of a repeat as that. There were other differences of opinion around some of the risks, the business cases. So trying to get the team to articulate what the kind of the key risks were on a project, very challenging. What the priorities were in terms of project delivery, again, quite challenging. And so some of the benefit of PDRI was drawing out those misalignments and then kind of helping the project management to bring the team together into one position. We talked earlier about this project environment and then kind of investing in the project environment to establish a high performance culture and establish it early on in that kind of timely area. So very important. When we look at some of the data, the CII data, benchmark data in the wider industry, and not including maybe that nuclear tends to have some extra factors involved, is that you could see between 6 and 10% or so of kind of cost growth if you don't have your environment in the right shape. Now, when our projects are £1 billion, that's not insignificant, and perhaps investing some more in those early phases could reap very significant rewards, or at least save projects from overspend. And we talked earlier a little bit about the leader behaviours, the stakeholders' behaviours. So really getting their encouragement to support the output and to support the teams. Not often we actually find that some of the project teams, it's not in their own hands, it's not in their own gift to actually address all the factors, and they need help from stakeholders. We also need the leadership to really be open to receiving the outputs and not be overly defensive when faced with low scoring. We did have some examples of people kind of saying, someone just got out of bed on the wrong side that day. Well, our facilitation style and process really make sure that that's not the reason why we're getting low scores. We're really trying to draw out and get the justifications behind every score. And finally, getting new leadership talent is very challenging into this environment. It takes a long time to recruit, get security clearances, get people up to speed with how things work in this particular space. So leadership's an area that we identified in the course of the project environment questionnaire was not being as kind of effective as it might always be. So we've actually, in the spirit of some of our other front-end development work, got some other tools that we're looking at to maybe see if we can identify ways that leadership can be improved. Just again, looking at the portfolio quickly, this is a heat map. On the right-hand side, you've got the kind of column for all the projects we did at the PDRI Stage 3, and you can see that most of them have got quite a lot of green there, and green's where you really want to be. As we move back towards the 2Is and the 2s, that kind of amount of green disappears pretty quickly, and that's really showing those projects that didn't have that optimal project environment, and the particular elements where we had fairly consistently some challenges in the project environment. Now, really, ideally, you want to see greens, fairly widely across the board from PDRI 2 onwards. So we do have a bit of work still to do on that. And just finally, before I hand back to Andrew, don't just take my word for it. This is what we, at the end of every interview, at the end of every meeting, we solicit feedback from the clients, from the participants about kind of the value or not that it might have raised. And you can see here in the orange ones are some from the clients and the blue ones from various participants. And I think the best one we ever got was when someone said, oh, this is like therapy, and really getting the opportunity to tell you some of the frustrations that I heard. Likewise with the clients, we actually got the clients kind of giving us, one was a new PM, he just joined the project, and he felt it really gave him great intelligence and insight into the state of his project, and also some of the key individuals within his team and how they'd responded to that. In other areas, we had a client who said, I'm desperately have this open door policy. I'm trying to get everyone to come and talk to me. To be honest, they're not doing it. And so this has really given him an opportunity to kind of get that 360 view from his team. Now, not everything is brilliant. And as we referenced earlier, some of the challenges with the question phrasing, very tricky, and meant that we had to, help with interpreting the questions. It's very, very important. The one-to-one interviews, keeping those dominant views from interfering, and the others that you can read there on the screen. I won't kind of cover them all. So that's overall, I think, from my perspective, it's been very positive to be part of this. It has been working with the collaboration impact with the working group, the steering group, has been really effective, and we hope to build on our rollout of PDRI across Sellafield and potentially across the wider NDA estate in the coming months and year. So with that, I will thank you and hand you back to Andrew.
Hello. I would just like to share some of the key lessons and reiterate a few of what Gavin said. For me, having the same people facilitate has meant that we've got consistent learning and therefore the same standard PDRI across the projects. We didn't maybe set out to do that, but it's definitely been a major benefit going forward. We've also talked about it for the project manager, but what we've now found with having a look at the portfolio, there's things we need to fix at enterprise level, not just at project level, so we can get those commonalities out and deal with them across all projects. So as Gavin said, aligning our processes slightly better or differently might give us a much better impact across all our projects. So we now got that group learning because we've done facilitation by the same people. So I don't know if that was a conscious decision we made, Gavin, or it was one we sort of have done by stealth, but that has been a major benefit. And it is based on info, so you can then target the areas where you can make a difference. The projects themselves can make a difference in their improvements, but we can make a bigger benefit for the future projects coming forward. I also think whenever you're going to put a change into a business, setting up a learning sort of group where everybody has a voice and a say has been really powerful, and I'd reiterate that on any business change you try to do. I think ploughing straight in with an implementation rather than doing a pilot and a learning and evolving as you go has been much better and probably saved a lot of time, effort and arguing along that journey. So anybody could come to the steering group and have their say, and the group would discuss it and make a decision and a way forward. They run on a 2 weekly basis for about an hour and a half. So it's a bit of a burden, but it has kept us aligned throughout, and I think that's been really important. Future direction, we want to try some different things going forward. So we want to try PDRI on smaller projects at some point. We've done them on fairly major and fairly sizable projects. It would be interesting to see what we find with smaller projects, so we'll trial that going forward. We're also wanting to trial something called framing before you get into PDRI to make sure you've got your direction right and your business decision making, and you've framed it properly before going forward. So that's another one that's in the front end definition. We're also going to look at the high performing teams tool, because what we've seen with the environment, that is there a tool there that can help us set up an environment that's better than what it is today? And we're also having a look at the construction readiness as well. Very similar to a PDRI technique, but it tests the construction readiness. And again, they're all things that could make a difference, but it's deploying them at the right time and in the right space, and getting that buy-in. And I think that's really important going forward. So on that, we will hand back to Ellie to take us through any questions, I think.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Gavin. That was really great. So we've had one question come through from Grace, and she has asked what members of the project team were involved in the self-scoring process.
Okay, so hi, Grace. So we had typically around 15 or so people just from the project team. They would have been project manager, some of the engineering managers, engineering leads. It would have gone wider into the some of the other functional personnel, from project controls, from safety, from quality, environmental. So we really tried to get representation from most areas of the project team, not just the senior leaders.
And I think on most of the major projects, we did go for the supply chain in the later ones, Gavin, to make sure the supply chain had the same view.
Correct. Yes, we had representatives. We had representatives from both, technical supply chain partners who are providing, engineers or engineering services, but we also had some from the manufacturing sector as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I've seen a few questions have now come in. So the first one from Annabelle says, you said you want to trial PDRI in smaller projects. Would you see this working within the smaller asset care type projects too?
There is a simpler tool, I believe, Gavin, that does smaller projects. We haven't. That's what we need to test, I think, going forward, because we have a large number of them and there is a cost with doing PDRI and there's a balance there to be had. So I don't think it's a definite yes or no, but we need to trial and make sure they've got a benefit. It's definitely paying big dividends on our major projects, but they're the ones we struggle the most with. So it's that value proposition back. I don't think it's a yes/no. I think we need to trial it and understand it first.
Linking to that, I was just going to say, linking to that, William has asked if there's a minimum size of project to warrant the investment. So
not really. the investment particularly in the facilitation costs using our model is higher than if you just did it potentially in a group environment. However, the value that we're getting from it is also much greater. The CII has some statistics that shows that for every $1 spent on PDRI, it pays itself back up to 25 times. So the investment statistically is very, very worthwhile, even if it seems high at first.
Thank you. And Stephen has asked, accepting that all projects are different in size, shape and structure, are there mandatory participants or roles who need to be able to contribute to get a quality PDRI output?
Sorry, can you repeat that? You just broke up for me there, Ellie.
Sorry. So accepting that all projects are different in size, shape and structure, are there mandatory participants or roles who need to contribute to get quality PDRI output?
Not essentially. There's nobody that's mandatory. There's obviously common sense would indicate that you need to have some of the project leadership in there. But we found that the value came from having that diversity. And not every project manager or director took part as a participant. Some of them wanted just to, they maybe sent their deputies and they were just happy to receive the output. Others did take part, learned a little bit about the process from being involved in the interviews along the way, and perhaps that helped them in terms of then learning from it and applying the output to their teams.
Thank you. On long-term projects, how frequently would you recommend revisiting the PDRI process to get up-to-date results?
So there's 4, if you want, formal application points, and they are aligned with the kind of typical front-end planning gated process. One of them is optional, the kind of 2I one. It's optional and is meant to be used when you have a prolonged period of detailed definition activity. So if you, especially some projects might be fast-tracked and you might be reviewing them every 6 months or 9 months if they have that kind of fast approach. Here in the nuclear world, things tend to take a little longer, and we might go a couple of years between stages, depending on the scale and complexity of that project or program. There's 4 mandated points.
Yeah, we have trialled though, Gavin, that when a project was weak on the accuracy score, we've gone back in.
Yes,
a period of time after to test it, and it had improved quite considerably. It still hadn't got within tolerance, but it does show they were on a track, and that helps to give the stakeholders some confidence as well that it's an improving situation. So I think some of it's about intelligent application in between if required.
Thank you. So we have also had lots of questions come in. So do you think the PDRI process can be automated using processes and AI?
Yeah, even individuals in our own company are interested in that idea. I think in a mature organization with individuals that were fully recognized the intent of the question and the language used and were able to answer it, potentially. The reality is that certainly in our organization, the facilitation has brought tremendous consistency to make sure that the output is in line with the intent. At the moment, certainly we're not in that space, and I probably would think it's a fair way off in terms of the getting the most out of the tool and getting that consistency.
Yeah, I think the facilitation and the questioning has really dug into the issues, and then that's really helped the playback and the action plan. Theoretically, AI could do that, but I think we're a way off that for us and our application at the moment.
Thank you. Do you need a steering group buy-in as catalyst to introduce the benefits to the PDRI process?
Do you need a steering group? I think a steering group has made the journey a lot easier and has given us value as we went, and we were happy to course correct on the way and learn, and we still learn from everyone that's done, and we ask open questions at the steering group to try and understand why that is, why that's different, or why that's something else. I think when you bring any change into a new business, I think having a steering group with a learning mentality and an open approach has got to be a benefit. And I only think this has gone as smoothly as it has because we've had one. I haven't tried it without one, so I couldn't tell you if it would have gone any better, but my gut reaction is it's been fundamental in developing it and keeping people aligned on the journey as well.
Yeah, and if I can just add, Ellie, that from the perspective of the kind of the delivery vehicle for the trials, for the deployment, for ultimately for getting it into process, it's been invaluable to myself and my colleagues to be to need to go and explain what we've done to the steering group, to be able to really and get their feedback. As we're down in the detail of trying to deliver it. We're some of us new to the Sellafield environment, and it's been really invaluable for us to have that sounding block and to have to go and kind of justify the course that we're recommending and get the steering group's buy-in. So I would highly recommend it.
Thank you. And Don has asked, what are the main key issues you find through this process?
I suppose there's different elements. If we're talking about the output issues from the various projects or the issues associated with the tool itself. I think certainly issues associated with the tool, we've covered that quite extensively. That's the interpretation, the need to use the facilitation. In terms of common areas that we found in maturity, we had a fairly consistent issue around requirements. So getting the requirements identified early. There was a real struggle for the participants to explain to us if they really had philosophies from the end user, if they had a clear grasp of what it was they were to deliver. In other areas of maturity, as we covered, there were some elements of some of the process engineering that were taking place later than we might have understood to be the norm. And then when we get into the project environment, typical areas of concern have been leadership, kind of techniques like getting constructability input at the right times, getting the construction groups to recognize the value and the importance of their contribution in the front end stages. So they're the kind of some of the typical issues that we've discovered across our portfolio.
Great, thank you. And we'll just take one last question, and this one is from William. He says, can knowledge of this tool be used proactively to inform the front-end activity schedule to preempt potential issues?
Yes. I think if you use the tool regularly, you will hopefully take on board the best practice that each and every one of the questions is really guiding you towards. And that would be able to be used, proactively to set your project up and kind of drive its maturity in the way that is intended. So yes, it would absolutely be able to be used proactively like that.
Great. Thank you so much, Gavin and Andrew. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, and thank you again, Andrew and Gavin, for giving up your time to host this event for us. On behalf of the APM Northwest branch, we really appreciate it. We'd be grateful if you could complete the post-event survey and also check out our upcoming events and webinars on the APM website. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Keep well and enjoy your evenings. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.